Hi there, my name's Amy Least, and I'm VP of Enable Education. I'm also an author at Kids Think About It Books. And this is a PowerPoint presentation that I recently gave at a conference for science teachers. And I just wanted to go through some of the basics of the slides. And the topic is bringing philosophy into the science classroom, something that's near and dear to my heart, obviously, as a proponent of philosophy for young people. I used to teach philosophy and humanities classes and found it really enriching to bring science questions into our sort of humanities-based lessons. So I thought it'd be interesting to see how a science teacher could bring philosophy questions into their lessons, into their classroom as well. So philosophy and science. A lot of people think that they're sort of at opposite ends of the spectrum, that arts and science are kind of two very different things in general. But what history teaches us, especially philosophical history, is that a lot of thinkers didn't really see them as separate things, that they were all just part of good thought. They were all just part of finding wisdom. One example is Aristotle, who was not only someone who discussed ethics and arts and politics, but also was a very keen biologist and an astronomer as well. In fact, his theories of how the universe was sort of laid out and structured were prevalent for over 2,000 years. Another example is René Descartes. And Descartes, in addition to being a philosopher and a writer, was also a biologist as well as a mathematician, very well known for both of them. So these two thinkers are just two examples of how philosophy and science haven't always been on opposite ends of the spectrum, haven't always been two separate subjects. They were once thought to be just, part of good thinking. This slide shows a few different movements in education in which arts and sciences are being brought back together again, that this old friendship is sort of being rekindled. One of them is the term STEAM. A lot of people are familiar with STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, but quite recently, arts has been added into that as well. One, to acknowledge that a lot of scientific and engineering and technological discoveries and innovations have a great deal of creativity involved to them, but also that a good scientific thinker can be very well-rounded, should have good communication skills, should have a little bit of a background in the arts as well. So that's an interesting sort of development in education. The emergence of 21st century skills as sort of a movement in education is also interesting too. These are soft skills like communication, like critical thinking, like problem solving, global awareness, media literacy, technological literacy. Again, a lot of these cross over into science as well, even though they're not specifically science-based skills. A third movement I wanted to mention was philosophy for children, or P4C. A lot of people talk about pre-college philosophy too. This is the idea that children, very, very young children too, even preschool children, can do philosophical questions, are able to think philosophically and critically. And that's an emerging movement too. So it's no longer uncommon to bring philosophy into a lot of different subject areas from a very early age. So what can philosophy do for science classes now? Well, here's a list of things that it can do. Basically, scientists already do analysis, they already do problem solving, they already do a fair bit of critical thinking. Philosophy just adds an extra layer of that. It enhances what's already part of a science class. So what kinds of questions can you bring from philosophy into a science classroom? Well, you can look at it in terms of different branches of philosophy. Metaphysics means theory of reality. And philosophers who study metaphysics usually talk about things like, what's the universe made of? Where did the universe come from? What are human beings made of? Are we mind and body or combinations of both? Do we have free will or are we determined by our biology? So here's a list of basic questions, and this is just a drop in the bucket. There are a lot of metaphysics questions that you could bring into science. Epistemology has some really clear ties to science, and this is the theory of knowledge. So philosophers will ask questions about how we learn, how we know something, the difference between true and false, and you can definitely see how this would tie into scientific inquiry in general. A lot of philosophers like to bring ethical questions into the science classroom, and you can see how this would apply as well, the theory of right and wrong. Science is done by human beings. It does have an impact on human beings as well as other beings. So it's interesting to take a step back once in a while and examine how we think about what's the right and the wrong thing to do in science. Maybe you wouldn't think to bring politics into a science classroom, but science is again, a human venture, and humans are political creatures. So the theory of power does apply to a lot of different scientific principles. Maybe you wouldn't think to bring aesthetics or theory of beauty into your science classroom, but again, ancient philosophers didn't really see the difference. Not the way we do today anyway. So you can ask questions about how science and art overlap, both in practice and in theory. You can also look at the beauty in science, the beauty in nature, the beauty in technology, and even in numbers. Here's a little activity you can try. Choose a particular lesson that you teach in science, whether it be covalent bonds or the structure of the human eye or cell division, and try and think of 2 or 3 related philosophy questions that you could ask about it. Then try and work it into an actual activity. Are you going to take 10 minutes at the beginning of class and have a mini debate? Are you going to work this into a lab report? How can you do it so that you make it part of the actual experiment or theory? Like any teaching task, there are challenges to bringing philosophy questions into the science classroom. A lot of people worry about how they make philosophy fit with core learning objectives, and there is crossover, so it's not the great task that it seems to be. What if you don't have a background in philosophy? Well, you can still bring philosophy in. There are resources out there as well. What if discussion ventures into difficult subjects? And I'm sure most teachers find that this happens in their classrooms once in a while, no matter what subject they teach. In philosophy, we say if you come across something difficult, it's probably a good question. You shouldn't shy away from it, just keep the discussion going. Make sure everyone's opinion is heard, make sure people back it up with good reasons. Can this be assessed and evaluated in the same way that STEM can? Again, there is usually an inquiry section in learning objectives in science, and there is in philosophy as well. It's just a matter of finding some crossover between the two. Thanks very much for listening. Again, my name's Amy Leask, and I'm VP of Enable Education, also an author at Kids Think About It. This slide shows our blog, our website, as well as our Twitter handles. Please follow us and let us know if you have any comments or questions. Thank you.